Yep. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for coming. I'm sure more people will come, but let's start because we have a lot to cover today. So today I'm very proud to have again, hello, please welcome. Very proud again to have Mike. He did a great job for our previous session, and now he continues. Very, very interesting topics about role-based access and also infrastructure topics around VNet and connectivity. So yeah, really great opportunity because I wanted for a very long time to cover a little bit more infrastructure in this meeting. We were very strong on the application side, on the services side, but not so much on the infrastructure. So for me, it's a great pleasure to introduce Mike.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you, Kaniel, for the introduction. Yeah, it is true that my background is more infrastructure related. I do have business experience as well. So the topic last time was more related to managerial or management of the Azure infrastructure and in the hierarchy as well, all the subscriptions that you have. But I wanted to go on to talk a bit more technical items that may be of value to you guys. As I said, we're going to start with Azure role-based access control, and then we'll talk about VNet to VNet connectivity after that. Hopefully I won't talk too much, and because I do have a tendency to waffle on. Please stop me if I do. And we'll get through this quite quickly, but hopefully some good stuff.
If you have a question, can we interrupt you or we should wait in the end?
You can interrupt me if you like.
Okay.
If you prefer to wait to the end, that's okay as well. So we should have time to do both. Okay, so I wrote this really great, well, I think it's a really great introduction. So I'm just going to read this to you, which is really boring. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about role-based access control. Identity is now being considered a new boundary layer for security. Rather than only protecting environments with perimeter security principles, the concept of identity and assumed breach is helping organizations to better secure their environments and to protect their data. With the principle of least privilege in mind, role-based access control allows organizations to assign only the necessary permissions required to allow users, groups, and applications to perform required functions and tasks. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good. That's what I was aiming for, making sense. So role-based access control is actually the new version of providing access to administrators or operators to do tasks within Azure. Back in the old days, we still have the classic model there. It's, I don't know, show of hands, who still uses the classic portal? Okay, so we've got one there, right. The classic model for administration was you have the service administrator, which is assigned by the account owner, which manages the subscription from an outside perspective. And that service administrator has the keys to the kingdom, can do anything. In addition to that, you can have up to 199 co-administrators who also have keys to the kingdom, meaning they can do whatever they want, period. That's it, they've got full control. Now, maybe back in the day, giving everybody full control and administrator rights and is like, a great thing, dead easy, we trust everybody here. But nowadays it's kind of like, yeah, accounts can be compromised. And if an account has more privilege than it really needs, that's a security issue. So hopefully gone are the days of the 199 co-administrators of unlimited power, and bringing in to the Azure Resource Manager model, role-based access control. Now, role-based access control can allow you to set fine-grained permissions, and that can be done at per user or per application. Or per group. Yeah, that's why I've got notes, so I can forget things. In addition to the basic default roles that you have, you can actually also create custom roles. And this is something that I'll cover how we do very shortly, because I feel it's really, really valuable to create your own roles. I think there's about 20 or 30 roles in there. Role definitions, sorry, that's the correct terminology. And they're all pretty good, and they've all got very specific tasks, but you guys know your teams and your organization better. You know what tasks and roles or permissions that your administrators should have. And going with the principle of least privilege is a really good model to follow. In case there is a breach somewhere for whatever reason, then the damage is limited. Right, so I do have another slide. Now, I did promise that I wasn't going to have too many slides this time, because I had quite a few last time. So we're going to go on to slide 205, and that includes both topics, right? So I think I can explain what RBAC is, kind of give you an idea of why we might want it. Talked a little bit about standard role definitions, assigning roles within the portal in PowerShell. Yeah, so that's where we're going to go next. With role definitions, you can use them and assign them either through the portal, so a GUI interface, or you can either use PowerShell. So I will jump into a demo and let's have a look at doing that. Okay. Right. Right, there we go. I'm just have to turn around because I can't see it on my screen. Okay, so what we've got here is my demo environment. And what we're going to first do is we're going to have a look at some of the permissions that are there already. Okay, so we're going to jump into subscriptions first of all. That's the top level. You know, you can assign a permission at this level, and I'm going to go in here. And we're going to go into here, access control. Now, when we use role-based access control, we can actually set user permissions at different scopes. One scope is the subscription level, another is a resource group, and another is actual resources, which is kind of cool. You know, you can actually give someone, for example, maybe they can read everything in the subscription. But maybe in a certain resource group, they can do all the networking. And maybe on one or two VMs, they've got the permission to do whatever. And maybe on some other VMs, maybe they've got the permissions to start and stop them. So you can set your permissions, what they can and can't do, as well as where they can and can't do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right, so first of all, we've got a subscription here. And at this level, we've got a group. Now this is inherited on the right here. This subscription administrators group is actually coming from the service administrator and also from the classic model. Something I mentioned last time, it's a legacy thing where if you add an administrator as a co-administrator in the classic model, they get inherited permissions in RBAC. I think it's something Microsoft have done to allow for a transition between the classic and the ARM systems. Okay, so if I have a look in here, we might see. Okay, so that's a service administrator. I'm going to go back one. And I've also actually assigned this particular user permission in here as well as an owner, so it's got the same permissions twice. And let's have a look at some of the resource groups to see if there's anything in there. Resource group. So let's go demo RBAC and access control. And there's nothing much in there just now, but we aim to change that. So in a moment or two, I'll show you how to add a user in here. We'll use a GUI. I'll also go over it in PowerShell as well. But you can see that on the right-hand side, the scope is actually inherited. So if you're starting from the top at the subscription level, the permissions get inherited down. I'll go into that in a bit more detail once we move into PowerShell. So that's the resource group there. And let's say, have we got a VM? I think we do. We've got demo VM01. There we go. So now we're going into a resource. And again, you can see there's this option for access control. And again, all we've got here are the inherited permissions. But again, that's been inherited from the top level coming down and down. Okay. Right. So let's just say we want to add a new user in there. And I've got a new user in mind. There's a big plus add button at the top. We can click that. And we can select a role, and then we can select, if you can remember what the user is. Let me just jump over to this. Thank you for your patience. I did actually prepare this in advance, so I do apologize. If I can just find the, right. I think I've got usernames and then I forget them, and then I have to look them up again. All right, so we actually have, let's paste, there we go. There we go. So Captain Cabinets is our administrator in here, and it's just a live ID because the directory that we're using is Microsoft Live ID directory. So we can add lots in. But if you're using your own directory that's maybe linked up to Active Directory or Azure Active Directory, then you can have your own users in there as well. So roles. Now at this level, there's not that actually many roles in here. Because we're actually looking at a virtual machine, there's only certain ones that are appropriate for virtual machines. So owner, contributor, reader. An owner can do anything and assign other permissions. Contributor can do anything except assign other permissions. And a reader can read anything. Those are the main three. They're at all levels within the Azure subscription. We've got a few more in there. I haven't looked in detail at any of these apart from Virtual Machine Contributor. But what you can do is, if you're curious about what they do, it gives you a little bit of a description if you hover your mouse over the little circle with the eye. So this one lets you connect, start, restart, and shut down your virtual machines in your Azure Dev Test Labs. Okay, that's great. We don't need that.
Is it possible to define our own custom roles?
Yes, and I will jump into that shortly.
Great.
But I will say, at the moment, there isn't a way to do it in the GUI portal. I'm going to demo that in PowerShell, but you can also do it with Azure CLI and ARM templates.
Perfect.
Right, so let's just let's give Captain Cabinets a role here. Let's make it a reader, and we'll save that. Adding user. This user is already in the directory that's associated with the subscription, so there's less involved. If you're adding a new user completely, then they get an email sent out to them, and they acknowledge that, and they'll log in, and then that's them sorted. Right, that was very exciting, as you can see. So we'll move on. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove Captain Cabinets because I'm fed up with him and he's not doing his job properly. So let's have a go away.
So you mentioned something interesting. You said that we can define custom role as part of ARM template.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, I haven't gone through the details of that yet myself. However, I will demonstrate that with PowerShell. Okay, so that's the portal, and looking at RBAC in terms of how to assign permission and to remove permissions. Pretty straightforward. We'll jump straight into PowerShell now.
Guys, are you using PowerShell or CLI? Which one do you prefer? Who uses PowerShell? Who uses CLI? Yes.
Okay. Right, so let's change this a bit about. Okay, so It's an awful lot of PowerShell. I'll briefly go through what's happening here. If you've got questions as I'm going through it, just let me know. I'll probably be looking this way, so you might have to speak up. Very straightforward. I like to stick break in here at the top in case I accidentally run the whole thing. It's just a self-preservation thing. Log in Azure RM account. You do that every time that you log into Azure with PowerShell, or per session, sorry. And get the Azure subscription, the ones that are listed. If you're using it, for those of you that haven't used Azure PowerShell, if you've got access to more than one subscription, you're going to have to specify which subscription you want to work on. You can also specify a default one that you'll always go to that one first. In this example, the subscription name, which I'm defining as a variable, is called Visual Studio Dev Essentials. I'm defining a resource group, and I'm selecting that subscription. Now, am I logged in? I need to check if I'm logged in. Let's try this. Argument is no, that's because I'm being silly and I haven't done this yet. Okay, so I've been logged out. I apologize, that's my bad. I will just log in. Well, this does serve as a demonstration for those of you who haven't seen this before. And on my screen, I get a little box to fill in. So I'll just fill it in just now. All right, thanks for your patience. I will say that the Microsoft PowerShell Blood, as we sometimes call it, the red text is actually getting better and better. Back in the day, it was, I apologize to those Microsoft people in the room, but you did create errors that say, an error occurred because there was an error. That I've seen that.
Don't apologize, tell us.
So nowadays it's actually a lot better. If you actually read them, they're actually pretty good, and you can usually figure out, what's actually going on. In this case, it's me being an idiot. But right, so let me just switch back. Okay, right. So I'm going to select that subscription just to make sure that's my. Okay, that's fine. Now I'm going to get the subscription ID, and I'm going to use this later for when we actually create our custom role. It's closer actually. Okay. Okay, so when we were looking at the GUI in the portal, we actually had a look at some of the role definitions. If you remember, when I was selecting the user Captain Cabinets and trying to figure out what Captain Cabinets was going to do, we had that drop-down list. We could choose a number of different titles. Now in PowerShell, we can get that information as well. But what I'll do first of all is I'll run the commandlet to get the information, but pipe it to get member. Now get member will give us basically the stuff that we can get out of that commandlet, as well as stuff we can do with that commandlet. Get member is a really good commandlet to use actually in this context. Okay, so the stuff that we can do with this commandlet, the methods, and the properties are the information we can get out. So you can see here we've got actions, assignable scopes, description, ID, is it custom, name, and not actions. Now, not actions and actions are not allow and deny. In kind of traditional administration, particularly in Windows systems, if you've got a deny, it always trumps an allow. So if you got allow this, allow this, allow that, and you say deny that, then it would always block that. However, not actions is actually a bit different. It's more of a convenient way to remove one privilege rather than to block it. That being said, if we've got multiple roles assigned to one user, they do accumulate. So a not action is an absence of an action, not a deny. Does that make sense? So you could have an action later on of that action, which would allow them to do that. I'm saying action too many times, I apologize. So not actions, actions, right. I think we're clear on that, hopefully. Clear as mud. So I'm going to jump back, and what I'm going to do is run the same commandlet, but I'm going to pipe it to select object so I can get this information, just this information. If I can select it, that would be really good. Here we go. Okay, so at the subscription level, these are all of the default role definitions. They're in alphabetical order, which is great. It tells you if it's custom. These are all false for custom because they're all default ones, and a bit of a description about what they do. And there's quite a few of them. Okay. If we want to actually delve into each role definition, we can actually look at some of the properties, like the actions or the not actions. Now that we're all clear on not actions, then that might make more sense. So there's a couple of ways to do that with PowerShell. Put brackets around the commandlet and do dot property, or you can put it into a variable and then do dot property. So I've looked for virtual machine contributor and the actions, and these are all the things that you can do as a virtual machine contributor. So basically, under the Microsoft.compute section, resource, sorry, in virtual machines, you can do everything. So everything that's below that. If you also had this, you would have Microsoft resources, deployments, you could do everything. Resource health, availability statuses, you can only read. And the one above that, recovery services, you can only write. They have actually specified these separately. Now, each role definition is made up of all these actions, and some of them have not actions. This particular one, I don't think it has any not actions. Let me just check. Nope, that has no not actions, if that makes sense. So no not actions, but plenty of actions, so that the actions you can do, but you can't do any not actions. Is that right? Not, no? Yes, okay, right, we're moving on. Right, contributor. Again, this is just a different method of getting the same thing that we just had there. We're just using a variable. And just so we've got another example, I'm going to do a query of reader. And nothing comes back because we put it in a variable. And I'm going to query that variable. Oh, we'll do that. And there are no not actions in reader. They're all actions. Okay. Right, now the bit that you've all been waiting for, custom roles. Okay, so it may be the case that the standard roles don't quite meet the needs of your team. They don't quite match up to the permissions that are required. Maybe one role's got too many permissions, or maybe it's a blend. Maybe you've got an administrator that does a few different things, but you don't want to have everything in network contributor and everything in virtual machine contributor, for example. So we can actually put together our own. So we'll skip past the operations there, but what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to check to see if there's any custom role definitions here. Now, we did do this earlier and there were none, but I'm just going to rerun this again. And there are none. Okay. I'm just going to reset this variable. Okay, now the most straightforward way to actually, that I've found to create a new definition is to start somewhere. You can start with an existing definition. Now, I'm going to start with virtual machine contributor. Now, at the very least, this gives you kind of the format or the syntax to actually add a new, create a new role. At the most, you could actually utilize what's already in there and maybe add to it or take out a few things. For this example, I'm going to empty it out, reset as a variable, and then put in some new actions that we can do. Okay, so first of all, we're just going to reset some of the properties. This is going to reset the ID because it will generate a new ID. We're going to give it a new name. We're going to give it, we're going to tell it it's custom, and then we're going to give it a bit of a description. So I'll run that in a moment. I'm going to clear it out. I'm going to remove all the actions in there. And then I'm going to add these new actions. Now, when we looked above previously, we saw there was all sorts of actions there. There is this commandlet above here can actually query what all the operations, or all the actions that you can do for a given provider. So for example, in the Microsoft.compute, if we run this, we'll get a whole list of the actions available. So I've grabbed a few. So for example, everything in Microsoft.compute, this role can read, and this role can, everything in virtual machine start an action. That's basically one thing, just start VMs, restart VMs, read all the networking, read all the storage, and yeah, that's probably the most significant ones. Once they're added, we will select the scopes that this is assignable to. So can we assign this role to a subscription and a resource and a resource group, or is it just going to be one of those that we're able to assign it to? You can see this is very customizable, and really before you even get into this, you've got to do a lot of planning in your team or organization so that you know what you want to set. Once we remove the scope, we add a new scope. In this case, it's going to be the subscription. I created the subscription ID earlier on. Not created, I queried that earlier on. And then we go ahead and just create the role. So I'm just going to run that just from there to there. And good, we now have a role definition. Yeah, I lost my internet connection. Yeah.
Maybe turn it off and on again.
Yeah. You guys should add that to your error messages. Please turn it off and on again. Are you sure it's plugged in? Although I have noticed you guys have got a bit more casual with your language in Windows these days. It's like, hey, how are you doing? All that sort of stuff. I'll try again. There we go. I think we're back online. Is that back, Kenny?
There's some delay, but I think.
Okay. Apologies for those that are remote that were just staring at a little screen. Okay, so roles. See if we can go a bit smaller. All right, so that's the same list of roles. Now, one thing to note here is that all these little roles got a little blue box next to them. All right?
Yeah.
And they also tell you how many users or groups are assigned to that particular role. But as we go further and further down, we may discover that one of those little boxes isn't quite blue. Oh, there it is. So our virtual machine monkey actually has an orange box. It's just something worth noting that any custom role definitions will appear in here, and they will be orange rather than blue. And again, we can look at the little thing, and that monkey can monitor, start, and restart virtual machines. Currently, there's no one assigned there. Was that evidence enough that it worked? Right, okay,
Yeah.
great.
What is the role of the groups?
Groups, you can assign permissions to a group, so then you can add users to a group. Same sort of idea as Active Directory. So it makes it a bit easier for management. So if you have a security group for doing one task, you just add users to that and move them from that group, rather than assigning the explicit permissions to the user. Right, so okay, back to the screen of PowerShell. Okay, so we can actually have a look at who's got access to what at the moment. So if we want to have a look at the permissions at the subscription scope, we can just run this. And Lost in the Tokyo Void, the owner, that's the only subscription, that's the only permission that is assigned there. But if you remember earlier, there were the inherited ones. You might be asking, why is that not up there? It's not up there because it's not part of ARM, but if you add a switch in here, you can actually get that. So if we run the same command, but include classic administrators, run that again, we can see that we've actually got, I've mistyped role definition, that's why it's not showing properly. We've got Lost in Tokyo Void, Lost in Tokyo Void again, and me. So the one at the bottom is actually in the classic. So that's bringing in the other administrators. What I will say is that this commandlet saved my skin for auditing subscriptions and finding out whether it's a subscription, and then you go into the account access and just add the user. They're pretty straightforward. Again, you can do this in PowerShell. I won't run through all of these, or should I? It's pretty straightforward. We can define at a subscription level, at a resource group level, or at a resource level. I'm just going to run these in a runner and then show you what's happened in the GUI.
Mike, sorry again. I think problems with the Wi-Fi.
Might be.
Check.
No. Okay. Okay. I forgot to run this. One point to note, if you're actually going to use PowerShell to do adding role assignments, you need to actually get the user principal name rather than just the username. And if you're using live IDs, the user principal name is this really, really long thing that's hideous, not just the email address that you've used. So if there's anyone in the room that can take that feedback back to Microsoft, that would be really good.
So how do you get the principal?
So a little bit of code at the top. I've just queried Azure Active Directory, get Azure RM AD user. I've done a search for the user name, Captain Cabinets, and I've pulled out user principal name from that result. It's pretty straightforward. That's a pretty simple way to do it. So I'm going to pull that user out, and then I'm going to get current role assignments for that user. And looks like there's nothing there because we removed them earlier. Okay, so there's nothing there. Let me get rid of that blood. There we go. I'm going to add that user one network contributor at the subscription level. It's going to be a reader at a specific resource group, and is going to be a virtual machine monkey on this particular virtual machine, which is this really long ID here. If I run that, okay, first one's done. And as you can see, this sign-in name is actually this really long. There we go, up here. It's really long combination of the directory that it's connected to, as well as some variation on the email address of the user. So this is added at the scope of the subscription. It's added the user as a network contributor. At this is actually the resource group demo RBAC. He is a reader, and this really long string here is a virtual machine called demo VM01, and Captain Cabinets is a virtual machine monkey for that virtual machine. And to prove this worked, I will go into the GUI that we all know and love, and I'm going to go into subscription first of all. We'll have a quick look there. Oh, and Captain Cabinets is a network contributor and is assigned at the subscription level there. That's great. Okay, so that worked. And we'll go look at the resource groups. Now, we'll actually go into a different resource group first of all. And I'm going to show you what Captain Cabinets is allowed to do in this different resource group. Well, it's an inherited permission, network contributor. Great, that's fine. That's what we wanted. But specifically in the demo RBAC resource group, if we look in the access control there, Captain Cabinets is mentioned twice. He's a network contributor at the top. It's inherited. And at the bottom, assigned at this level is a reader. Okay, that's good. That's what we wanted. Now, within this resource group, let's have a look at the resources. And it was demo VM01. Of that. Control. Captain Cabinets, again, is a network contributor inherited from the subscription level. Is a reader at the, again, inherited from the resource group level, and is a virtual machine monkey at the resource level, this particular VM. And to prove that it's not gone into another VM. We have another VM to prove that he's not in the other VM somewhere. I'll have to go back one level. All right. What does he call this, guys? It's like it's a journey, isn't it? You put your blades and you go on your journey. I have to go back in my journey. So we've got demo VM 02 and access control. Captain Cabinet is a network contributor at the subscription level and a reader at the resource group level, but not got access to that specific VM. So you can see, I mean, this is just one role, but you can see there's actually a lot of granularity there. I mean, not just where we can actually assign the permissions to, what permissions we can assign, plus the fact that we can actually create combinations, these custom roles as well. So it's a really good tool to help you manage your Azure subscriptions. And your homework for next time is to go away and implement this in all of your subscriptions. I will make the PowerShell available if you wish to copy it. It's absolutely fine. Otherwise, you can do it in the GUI, apart from the custom roles thing. Let me just see. I think there was maybe one other thing. What says fin? Oh, I think that's French for finish. Right. Okay. So that's basically an overview of custom roles in RBAC and using RBAC in PowerShell and Portal. You can do it in ARM templates if you're good with JSON. I'm not so good at JSON yet. I'm working on it. And Azure CLI is possible. There is refreshments out there. Is there a fridge at this end, or is it just?
on that way.
Yeah. So help yourself. I probably shouldn't be saying this because this is not my office, but I think it's complimentary.
Yes.
Right.
We again lost connection. Something is wrong with the Wi-Fi.
Well, I don't know. It's a bit of a dodgy computer. This. It's like
No. I am also losing connection.
You're right.
Uh,
you guys do intros? Did you do intros at the start of the meeting?
no, we haven't actually. No.
Shall we?
Yeah, let's do that.
Hi everyone, my name is Ankur. I work at Microsoft. I've recently moved to Tokyo, so now I'm here. And I know a couple of you guys, but not everyone. But yeah, feel free to say hello. Yeah.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Does everyone know Kanyo?
Yeah. Okay, I'm Kanyo. Very nice to meet you all here. I think I know most of you, but for the people that don't know me, I'm organizing this meetup, and I invite all of you to be presenters and to share your experience. I'm sure that you have a lot to share. I'm interested very much in cloud. I work in Rakuten, and yeah, that's it. Thank you.
So my name is Issei Terapa. Now I'm in charge of Microsoft Japan. I was also in Rakuten, and I joined months ago. Yeah, I'm still new, but yeah. Well,
Yes.
my name is Mokuyo. I was in Rakuten. Yeah. 2 years ago, I was using Azure, but I don't know. I don't use Azure, but I want to use Azure. So,
Hello, my name is Yokobayashi, and I'm working about the very big enterprise environment. So I should do some kind of script. I want to teach some image.
My name is Abaiti, and I am working in a company which is specialized in authentication and authorization. And this in relation with this Azure, with kind of our friend who access control is this Starbuck. So I'm using this. So that's the reason why I'm here. Nice to meet you.
So I am Manik Shah. My parent company is BJIT, but I'm working inside OIL. My job is digital public analytics. I am 3 years ago I joined as ASP.NET programmer. Now I don't have to use ASP.NET or any .NET. Only Excel and Python. But I'm really interested in Azure.
I should stop. I'm not in
With I think I'm just for that.
My name is Biju. I run an IT company. So some of our clients are interested in Azure, and we're trying to set up something for them. So just wanted to we used to before. Just for the sake of trying to do something about it. Great.
My name is Eric. I used to work in Rakuten. Now I work in Microsoft. Actually, I used to live here. I'm based in Munich. Solution
Well, my name is Ignacio. I do work at Rakuten. I used to work with Satyagrahi, listen, and I'm working on building platform solutions using different platforms like Azure and other cloud solutions as well. So that
Hello, I'm Stefan. I work for a Japanese security company. C# developer, doing automation stuff at home using Azure.
Hello, I'm Robert. I work for a Japanese startup here in Tokyo as a .NET developer. I'm here because I'm interested in Azure myself. We run AWS. Nice to meet you.
My name is Jason. I work for an American company in the restaurant industry. I lead the team who's transitioning from a monolithic architecture to a microservice architecture, and we are an AWS shop, but I find it's very good to learn a lot about Azure and the other platforms out there. And I've never worked at Rocket.
We should correct this.
Did you learn this up?
Yes. Yeah. Usually C# stuff, the newer stuff, and some Node.js, but no Python or Java. That.
So I've already been speaking for some length of time, and probably I'm from Scotland. My name is Michael, or Mike, it's fine. I used to work at Rakuten. I'm now an independent IT consultant. I focus on Azure infrastructure and Windows Server infrastructure as well. So myself and Kano used to do a lot of work together, and particularly to do with migration to the cloud, moving applications to the cloud, and looking at different solutions. And we did a lot of work to push Azure within Rakuten. Yeah, certainly we spent a lot of time doing that. As part of what I used to do, it's not just the infrastructure side of things, it was also some kind of management type stuff from a business perspective, like cost analysis and cost analysis of what we are using, cost analysis of, if we do move to the cloud, what's it going to cost us now in the future? Is it going to be a saving? if we move in different ways, is that going to give us a saving there? If we do a lift and shift, just take our VMs and dump them, which is quickest, but least cost effective. Or if we go change everything over to PaaS, is that going to be the way to go for us? So there's a lot of work involved with that. And I work very closely with Canio, building up models, cost models for that type of thing. Yeah, nice to meet you all.
Okay. Yeah.
Quick. I'll wait till you come back. Oh, no worries. Good to see you again. You gonna be back in time soon?
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Next time you should also present.
Yeah, I know. It's like
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Shall we get started?
Yes.
Okay. Right. I'm going to move on to my very hefty slide deck. Again. There we go. That was my first slide. Very exciting. And we covered slide 2. Now on to slide 3 of 5. In organizations I've worked for in the past, the presentations were very common, and filling those PowerPoint slides with as much text as possible seemed to be the way to go. I want to spare you from that and go minimalist here. And as a result, you get to hear my wonderful voice for the next while. Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is Azure VNet to VNet connectivity. Now, VNet, in case you don't already know, is a virtual network in Azure. A VNet has a scope or can have more than one scope of IP ranges. Within those IP ranges, you can create subnets. And within a VNet, when you create subnets, they can all by default talk to each other. Okay, so you've created a VNet that's maybe got a scope of, I don't know, maybe a 10/8. And you've created some subnets in there. And all those subnets within that VNet will be able to talk to each other. Well, the resources in there. So we've got a VM or an application or whatever. They can all talk to each other. Unless you start putting network security groups in place, which is something I'll talk about in a different day, but basic firewalling in Azure. Now, what if you want to have one VNet or resources in one VNet be able to talk to resources in another VNet? Well, there are a couple of solutions for that in Azure, and it really depends. Well, more recently, because there's been a new solution added called peering, it really depends on your criteria. I'm going to talk about 2 ways to connect VNets together. One is using gateways. This is the, in inverted commas, traditional way. We will have a subnet that's dedicated to gateways, called a gateway subnet. And if you don't call it gateway subnet, it doesn't work. Yeah. So, which is actually quite funny because I'll show you in a moment, but in the portal, they've actually added a button to create a gateway subnet. And the only difference between a gateway subnet and a normal subnet is the name is gateway subnet. Yeah. So it's an idiot-proof button that you click now to say, give me a gateway subnet. I'm sorry, I just found that amusing that went in there. But they must have had a lot of support calls. My gateway subnet is not working. Oh, it's because you didn't call it gateway subnet. Anyway. Now, with connecting VNets together with gateways, there's a bit more work involved. You create your, hang on, I'll move to my next slide. Hang on, very excited. There we go. Right, minimalist, you see, right? So, what we would do for VNet to VNet connections using gateways, we would configure the VNets, unless we already have them. We would configure a gateway subnet. We would configure the gateways and then configure connections between the gateways. It's an IPsec tunnel. Yeah. standard VPN, as one of the things that I was going to point out was that when you create a gateway, you need to actually also create a public IP resource. Now you might think, if you've got a public IP at each gateway, oh, it must be routing over the internet, but it doesn't. It actually routes within Azure's backbone, which is much better, particularly for latency. And we'll come on to my last slide on that. I saw this map and I thought it was really cool because I know Google are doing this as well, but the fact that Microsoft are actually laying their own cables, and there's the link. You can all write that down. Go there later on. So this shows the actual physical fiber links that Microsoft have got going so far, and it's growing all the time. Apparently, the fiber links are quite fragile, though. Stuff can happen to them, so they do put in a lot of redundancy. Anyway, I just liked that picture, and I thought it was really cool to share. I will talk about VNet to VNet connection with gateways through a demo. We should have enough time. The peering is a lot quicker. Peering is very straightforward. You don't need a gateway subnet. You can just set one VNet to connect to another VNet, and there's a couple of tick boxes depending on the characteristics of how you want the traffic to behave. The caveat there, though, with peering is it's within the same Azure region. Okay, so if you've got a VNet that is based in East US and you've got one in Japan East, then you can't use peering yet. Perhaps they'll figure that out and they'll get that up and running for us at some point. But VNet peering is a very new feature that they've added. It's within the last 6 months or a year. Last 6 months, I think. If you've got VNets in different regions, you use gateways just now. If you don't, if they're in the same region, even if different subscriptions, if they're in the same region, use peering. It's way simpler. Okay. Right, I'm going to leave this up. No, I'm not. I'm going to remove that. So I mentioned that we're going to have to do several things: configure VNets, configure gateway subnet, configure gateways, and connections. So I'll run through this fairly quickly, and I'll let you see how it's done in the portal as well as with PowerShell. I'm not going to run through it completely because gateways take time to build. There's a little blurb at the bottom or warning, Surgeon General's warning, this takes up to 45 minutes to make. In my experience, the quickest I've seen a gateway created was 20 minutes, but on average it is closer to 40 minutes. You can create them in parallel, but the way I've done it with the PowerShell script here, it's actually in series, so it's not that speedy. It can also be done with ARM templates and also with Azure CLI. Anyone that's not touched on ARM templates yet, they are awesome. Now, if you're not familiar with JSON, it can melt your brain a bit to get used to the syntax. I'm not a developer, so it really melts my brain to get into it, but it's actually very, very powerful, and it's my recommendation that it's worth looking into. It's very, very powerful, very quick way to deploy entire infrastructures.
And also, I think it's good to mention that there are a lot of ready templates that you can start.
Yes. So, yeah, slight digression, but very, very important. The Microsoft themselves, as well as many contributors from outside of Microsoft, have built up templates of things that they think are useful. And they're called the Azure Quick Start templates. You just Google that. Sorry, you can Bing that.
They're on GitHub.
Yes, they're on GitHub as well, so you can pull down the latest code. They've got buttons, and you can say deploy to Azure. It does it for you. You can use that button, or you can use PowerShell to actually run the templates. You can use the GUI to the portal to run the templates, or you can use Azure CLI to run the templates. Again, that might be a demo for another day. It's pretty cool stuff. Look it up, seriously. So I'm going to jump into a demo, and I think I will demo this first of all. I've pre-created some resources, mainly because it just takes a lot of time to do things in the GUI. And we want to go to VNet GW. Okay, so generally the first thing to do is create a VNet. You can create a new virtual network or VNet multiple different ways, but if you go up to the top plus sign here, you can go to networking. You can go into virtual network and you can create, and then you get the requirements and you just fill in the blanks basically. Some of you might have seen this already and use it extensively, some of you might not have. I won't run through it, I'll just quickly show you that you've got a name, you've got address space, subnet name, and then a subnet range, IP range for that subnet, the subscription and resource group and location. It's pretty straightforward stuff. What's worth noting here is that when you create an address space, you don't need to use it all up at this time. So, let's say I wanted to create a /16. I could still have a /24 in there. So you don't need to use it all up. My personal preference when I'm doing this with gateways in mind is I usually create a subnet at the beginning of the range. That's just me. Your own organization will probably have its own way of doing things. But it's important to make sure you leave some space or some IP range available for gateways. The smallest that I've seen used is a /28, so very small, but I wouldn't recommend that. You can know future growth there. If you want to add more connections to different networks. For example, you want to do site to site back to your data center, or if you want to do point to site, if you want users to connect in directly to this VNet, you need to have space or IP addresses available in that gateway subnet. And it's not an easy thing to do to change that one. So I usually allocate a /24, but again, it depends on your own organization, how you do that. My point is just plan your IP ranges with the gateway subnet in mind. So I'm just going to cancel out of this because I've already pre-created some VNets. So in this resource group test GW, I have got 2 VNets, and I've actually got half of what I need for the gateways. So VNet 1, I've got show you the address space actually first of all. It's a 10.100.0.0/16, and subnets in there. We've got a server subnet. Now that can be named anything, but we've got the gateway subnet, which must be called gateway. And look, there's that button that they've added that is just subnet, but it gives it a name, gateway subnet, and grays it out so you can't push the wrong button. I'm sorry, I'm still shocked that that's gone in there. It's good, it's convenient, but yeah, it must have been a lot of calls. So we've got a gateway subnet here. We've got a server subnet. It doesn't matter what order they're in, what IP address ranges there are. Just the size is important depending on how much you want to expand in the future. And yeah, so it's just about planning. Great. Okay, so we've got 2 subnets in there. That's ready. And if we look back, I need to go back in my journey. I've got gateway 01, which is a virtual network gateway, and we've got a public IP associated with that. And if you remember, I said that the public IP is required for the technology, but it doesn't route over the internet routes through the backbone. So I've done half of this. I will show you how to do the other half. So I will go into.
So Mark, about this public IP, you cannot access it from internet. you book it, or how?
The IP address, the public IP address, isn't for accessing the internet. It's purely for the gateway service.
Okay.
And the gateway is a service, but it's a VM behind the scenes. And for routing, it needs to have a public IP address, but it's not, doesn't have any, there's no way, shape, or form that it's associated with internet access for resources. Okay. If you want internet access for resources in that network, you will need to assign public IPs to those VMs or whatever, or have a DMZ and a separate gateway to do that. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes.
So I want to go into networking, and I want to have a virtual network gateway. Now, we're not going to use local network gateway here, but I just want to touch on it. A local network gateway isn't really a gateway. It's just a definition of what you have in your own on-premises data center. So if you're creating a site-to-site from an Azure VNet back to your data center, you would have in Azure you would have a gateway, so a virtual network gateway, but you'd also define a local network gateway so Azure knows what you have in your data center, like what IP address ranges and things. Sorry for the digression, but I think it's important to know the difference there. So all we're going to use is a virtual network gateway. This is the second gateway. I've already pre-created the first one for VNet 1. I'm going to create this for VNet 2. And I'm going to call it VNet 02 gateway. Is that right? It's going to be a VPN gateway. You can see there's an express route option there. That's a topic for another day. It's going to be route-based. The SKU is basically how powerful the VM is in the background. I'm going to leave it standard. There is a separate article on, I don't know if it's TechNet now, but docs.microsoft.com, all about different SKUs and what they're capable of. We're going to select a virtual network, one that's already been pre-created. We're going to use VNet 02. Now, this will only show you appropriate VNets. If it doesn't have a gateway subnet, if it has a gateway subnet already in a gateway, allows you to create the gateway subnet from here if it doesn't have a gateway subnet. Apologies. So it's chosen the first range /24 within that VNet range that I allocated earlier. This is by design, just make it nice and easy and convenient. We're going to have to get a public IP address for this, and none are available. Give me one pip. We do. And it's going to be in that subscription, in that resource group, and it's in that location. That's all fine. And down at the bottom, the surgeon's general warning again. Providing a virtual network gateway may take up to 45 minutes, and it can. It really can. So plan these deployments if you're going to use them. Good time to make several cups of tea, or go for a coffee, or go for a walk. Take a nap. Whatever you want to do. I'm going to kick this off, and I'm just going to leave it. It's not going to be ready for the end of this session, so I'll move on to one I prepared earlier. Deployment started. Great. So I'm going to jump into a different resource group where I've already done the rest of the work. So it's demo VNet gateway resource group. Now you can see here that we've got, let's arrange by type. We've got two gateways. We've got a gateway east and a gateway west, and those are in East US VNet and West US VNet. And we've got an East public IP and a West public IP. And finally, we've got a connection East to West and West to East. So we need to make sure that both gateways are aware of where they need to connect to, and that they have the right information to allow them to connect. If we go into one of these, we can actually have a quick look. It gives you some information. It's got some data that's gone back and forth. Gateway 1, Gateway 2 has got the east and west there. It's got the different IPs. We can even have a look at the pre-shared key, super secret key that you can display very easily. And that's really it. So we've got our VNets, we've got a gateway subnet, and in that gateway subnet, we create a gateway in both VNets, both sides. And once we have the gateways, we set up the connections, again, one on each side, so they're both aware of each other. And that gives you the connectivity. And you can see I've had a whopping 15.44 kilobytes of data going back and forth between these. I've had it up and running for, I think, 2 hours. So that's pretty speedy, I think. There's nothing in those VNets. Right, so that's pretty straightforward in the Azure portal. I will show you some of the PowerShell that can do that to help you automate this kind of deployment. And to be honest, this is much better to automate this kind of thing. Less chance of making mistakes, plus it's consistent. And if you're going to do it more than once, yeah, just script it, whether it's PowerShell, Azure CLI, or a JSON, an ARM template in JSON. So let me just quickly jump back to PowerShell. Okay. Still okay for time?
Yeah.
Okay. So I won't run this independently. I'll just kind of talk about some of the things in the script. Now, I'm not a script wizard. I just, I've come from an administration and support background, so I just want to get stuff done. So if you see any really terrible coding in there, please don't raise your hand and comment on it. No, tell me after the fact and I'll fix it. Okay, so start at the top, log into Azure RM. We've already done that. Select your subscription. Yep, no problem. Define some variables, the subnet, resource group, location, VNet name, subnet name, gateway subnet, again called gateway subnet. I think I've said this 3 times already. It has to be called gateway subnet. If you're not sure, push the button that says build me a gateway subnet.
We should check this thing.
It'll be support calls, guaranteed. Yeah. It's like my gateway subnet's not working. What's it called? Gateway subnet 2 or something like that. I'm defining the VNet prefix, a subnet for that, and the gateway subnet, and I'm designating some DNS for those VNets. That's another topic for another day, but within the VNets, sometimes when you set them up by default, it uses Azure's DNS service. So all the resources within those VNets will know about each other by name. But if you've got it connected to a corporate network, a corporate infrastructure, then you're going to have problems. And I will tell you this, since I've been working in IT since '99, the root of all evil is DNS, okay? It always stems back to DNS, right? Anyway, you can specify what DNS servers you want those resources to use. And you can specify that at the VNet level, you can specify that at the subnet level, or you can specify at the resource level as well. Topic for another day. That was the quick overview. Right. I'm defining a gateway name, public IP name, config name, connection name for one direction, connection name for the other. Create the resource group unless it already exists. Basically, it's an if-then statement. If you're going to create subnets, if you're going to create a VNet from scratch, in PowerShell, you need to define what that configuration is going to be. What are your subnets going to be? And then you feed that into the commandlet to create the VNet. So I'm creating one here, and I'm creating another one here, and then I'm actually piping those into this here to create the actual VNet. That's code we don't need. Creating a public IP address and putting the output into a variable. I find that useful because then I can use the variable later, rather than then trying to get the resource and then putting it into a variable later. When we create a gateway, we're going to need to define the config first of all. The VNet it's going to use, the subnet it's going to use, and then we create the config based on that. I mean, all of this is on the Azure documentation, and I'll say this as well. Going back a couple of years, the documentation was not great and inconsistent and had errors. Recently, very, very good documentation that I found on all aspects of Azure. They even split it up. So you've got one article, and at the top, you've got a drop down, and you can say, well, I actually want to do this in the portal. So you click the portal, and the article adjusts, and you've got a slightly different article to do the work in the portal. Or PowerShell or Azure CLI, and sometimes JSON. So it's worth having a look at the documentation. It is good, and it's consistent, particularly with the naming that they use for variables. Pretty straightforward. Getting the Azure VNet, we're getting the subnet, which again is the gateway subnet. We're then creating the configuration, and then we create the gateway. And this is again the one that takes up to 45 minutes. This last command. Then I'm doing it all over again for the other VNet, the other one I want to connect to. That's all of this here. And then this section here is we're just going to get the VNet, get the gateway objects once they've been created, put them in variables, and then use those variables with some other information to create a west to east connection or an east to west connection. We have to do both. We're specifying the shared key in there. This is just a command to check the connection. And I've got fin at the bottom there. So I'm not going to run this. It's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of code, but once it's done once, it's pretty straightforward. And I'll be honest with you, the documentation, again, a lot of this is from the documentation and just adjusted. They have done a good job on this. So, any questions on VNet connectivity with gateways? Right. I know staring at a screen full of code this late at night is probably not the ideal, and I do apologize. There is green tea out there. It's got caffeine in it, so there's no excuses. But we'll see how we go. So I'll move on to VNet peering. So peering, as I said earlier, is a newer feature where we can actually connect two VNets together in the same region, even if they're in different subscriptions. Okay, and that's quite a cool thing because you might have resources in one subscription here and one subscription there, for whatever reason, and maybe you want them to talk to each other. Maybe right now they both connect down to your corporate data center, and maybe you want to have them talking to each other directly. I don't know. There's lots of potential scenarios there. But if they're in the same region, we don't need to go through all this rigmarole of creating gateway subnets and gateways and connections. We just set up the peering. Let's have a look at how to do that in the GUI in the portal. First of all, and click the button, and we should be able to change. Okay. Great. Okay. I think I've pre-created this. So you can see that I've actually got two VNets in this resource group. They are both in the same region, but they could be in different subscriptions. The caveat with different subscriptions is you need to have administrative privileges or enough privileges in order to do this work. So network contributor should be able to do this, but you need to have privileges in both subscriptions. If we go into the first one, like setting up the gateways, we need the gateway connections. We need to do it in both directions. So we need to let VNet 1 know about VNet 2, and then we need to go into VNet 2 and let it know about VNet 1. So I currently have, do I peer set? Yeah. Do I? Peerings, there we go. Yes, so I've actually got a peer set up here already, and this one is VNet 01 to VNet 02. And if I go into here and go into the peerings, I should have VNet 02 going to VNet 01, so that's both directions. Okay. The way to set this up is you go to the big button at the top, says add. As you can see, there was no gateway subnet button up there. Okay, very important that.
Okay.
And you stick in a name, you tell it it's resource manager. You can see that actually has classic. You can actually use this with between the classic and the ARM portal. But my recommendation is move away from classic. Get into the ARM. It's much better. And classic will go away at some point. Now there's two ways of actually choosing where you want to connect to. You can either tell it you know your resource ID, so then you do the long slash subscription slash long GUID slash this resource slash blah 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 blah. If you know that and you like all those slashes, then that's great. You can use that. If you'd rather just click some stuff, then you can choose your subscription, and I've only got one available here. You can choose your VNet. They're both grayed out because I've actually got it already pre-configured. And then you can select your configuration at the bottom here. Now, these configuration, you can actually set up connectivity without ticking any of these, but I'll quickly go over what they actually mean. Allow virtual network access. Do I need to explain that one? Right, I don't think I need to explain that one. Allow forwarded traffic. Allow forwarded traffic is if the other VNet has had traffic come to it from outside, is it okay to then forward that traffic to this VNet? All right. Yes or no? All right. Depends on how you want things set up. Allow gateway transit and use remote gateways are exclusive. Exclusive or, is that right? So it's, you use one or the other within each side of the VNet. Basically, between these two, you're saying, if you want to go somewhere else, if the traffic needs to go outside of these VNets, do we use like another gateway within one of these VNets? So if we've got one VNet, VNet 1 maybe has access to the internet, and VNet 2 doesn't. So maybe we want VNet 2 to have access to the internet through VNet 1. Or maybe VNet 1 has access to your corporate data center. That's probably a better example. So perhaps you want the traffic from VNet 2 to do one hop over VNet 1 and then use that gateway to come back to your data center. That's what those are for, basically. And you tick them as appropriate. But as you can see here, I've already got this configured, so I'm not going to do the click-throughs. And you can adjust these, I believe. Yeah, you can. So just to wrap up, I'll show you how to do this in PowerShell. It's not as long-winded as the gateway model, the gateway feature. And I want to switch to peering. Define some variables as before, and you can see there's not quite as much there. Still a little bit there. Actually, the top bit is creating subnets. So if you've already got the subnets in place, you don't need to bother with that. One commandlet, set up peering from one direction to the other. Another commandlet to set the opposite direction. And then these are just to connect to check the connections. It's pretty straightforward stuff. For different subscriptions, I put a note in here. You need to use the switch remote virtual network ID and then specify that ID. You can get that from the properties from the GUI or from PowerShell. And if you want to remove all, there's a commandlet to do that too. And danger, right, okay. That's it. Do you want to see this in action? I don't know if I can maybe run this, but it's pretty straightforward. The VNet, you can see that the VNet to VNet peering is a couple of clicks away. There's a couple of lines of PowerShell if you've got everything at the VNet subnet set up. You don't need to worry about gateway subnets or naming gateway subnets gateway subnet in case that might cause problems because it's not called gateway subnet. So no additional subnets. It's much simpler. But the caveat is that it's only one region, only the same region. So if you've got West US, they can connect no problem. Japan East can connect no problem, but Japan East and US East can't do it at the moment. I don't know when that's going to happen, unfortunately. I think that's it. You'll be pleased to know. You can all breathe a sigh of relief. I've written a couple of articles on what I've just presented that I'm going to stick on my LinkedIn profile probably tomorrow. So it'll cover what I've talked about, but without the Scottish accent. But you probably will read it and hear my accent as you read it, I hope. No, okay.
Custom reader.
Well, that's it, kind of. I mean, that's going to be after you create the Twitter bot that mimics me,
Exactly.
which should be pretty simple,
So we need to plan like a long roadmap.
Yeah, so the next stage, we'll have Scottishness about it. So yeah, I'll stick that on my LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, and you don't even need to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you just do a search from tomorrow, you should be able to find an article on RBAC and an article on VNet to VNet connectivity, including some example PowerShell as well. Any questions? We all look awake, which is good. So it's like that means I must be, covering all the bases.
So part of the obvious difference support for the different regions. Which method are you going to recommend us? Is there like some VNet peering or like a connection through gateways or?
In terms of, well, it depends on your scenario.
Yeah.
Gateway is still the kind of default way of connecting VNets to other networks, whether that's a VNet or a user or a corporate network. And that's how it is just now. If you're using ExpressRoute as well, route. I don't know.
Scottish. It's fine.
All right. You mean Scottish? It's fine. That implies I'm wrong.
Just fine.
Right. ExpressRoute. You still need to use a gateway. It's a slightly different gateway. It's configured in a different way. You tick the box that says ExpressRoute rather than VPN. Very complicated stuff.
Do you guys know what ExpressRoute is?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Maybe you can explain it.
If you need a dedicated pipe, let's say you have your own data center and you need a dedicated pipe that's not on the public net, then you want an ExpressRoute. But just a note, it's expensive, but you get what you pay for.
Yeah. And you can share the ExpressRoute. So if you've got multiple subscriptions, you can have multiple connections over that ExpressRoute. Think of it as a couple of cables, right? So an ISP has plugged in a couple of cables into an Azure data center and then the other end into your data center. That's pretty much what it's like. And then you put the ExpressRoute connection on top of that, which is a gateway connection. It's a VPN tunnel. It's redundant as well, so there's usually 2 lines. And it can be shared amongst multiple subscriptions, which is another thing. There are also different levels of ExpressRoute in terms of its performance, but also its capability. There's the basic ExpressRoutes can have different speeds and different bandwidth allowances, but can only connect to that region directly. So if all of your virtual networks are all in the same region that you're connecting your ExpressRoute to, no problem. But if you want to actually have connections around the world using Azure's backbone, and don't want to use the gateway to gateway thing, if you use a Pro or premium version of ExpressRoute, then that will allow you to connect anywhere. So But again, it's pretty cool actually. It's a really good option if you need that dedicated line, high-speed line back to your own data center. Did that answer the question?
What's do you know roughly the bandwidth of a gateway? Like there are limits, right?
There are limits, and there is a very good Microsoft doc webpage on that. I don't know them off the top of my
I
head.
think it's like 200 megabits.
Yeah, it varies depending on the level that you're paying for. There's also an allowance of how much data can flow as well. But it actually works out cheaper, I think, in the long term, or if you've got lots of use of it, than actually having like a site to site. Yeah, so spreadsheet's cool. Anything else?
Somebody has a question? Do you like the topics? Are they useful?
You don't need to nod just because I'm here. I can go and leave the room and you can like vote.
So which one did you like more, the ARM part or the infrastructure part? Of course, this depends a little bit of your background, but which one was more interesting, ARM or ARM? Who's for ARM?
For sure.
Okay.
Mike, you're so good with this stuff. You got to get into the ARM stuff. You'll love it once you get into the declarative stuff.
Oh, the templates.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've been using templates a little bit, and shouting at them a lot because there's this. If you use Visual Studio,
The JSONs.
yeah, Visual Studio Code, free version of Visual Studio. It's really basic, but it's actually quite good. It's free. There's also Visual Studio Community Edition, which again is free. Actually, the subscription that I'm using is one of the benefits of Visual Studio Community. There's a couple of like freebies and 12 months of Azure. I think it's $30 a month. No, $25 a month, which is not a huge amount, but it gives you enough to play with. Actually, I wrote an article on LinkedIn about that as well. So if you do find me on LinkedIn, well, the last article I wrote a couple of weeks ago has got lots of links to free resources, one paid, but most free, to help get your knowledge up to speed with Azure. So it's quite a good deal, actually. Anything else?
I have a suggestion. There is a article essential subscription there.
Yes.
It's the same price.
It's exactly. See, I tried to cheat and I tried to get both, and it told me no. It's the same offer, but with a different like front end. I mean, the IT Cloud Pro. I can't remember it. IT Pro Cloud Essentials or something like that. Again, I've mentioned that in my article on LinkedIn. So if you have a look at that, you'll see one of the links there. That's a really good one because it gives you courses specifically about getting your Azure knowledge up to speed. So it focuses on like the compute or focuses on the networking or storage. So it's another great resource to look at. Thanks for bringing that up. It's a really good resource.
That is a very useful for issue about safety for 533.
Yes, the 533. Yeah, I saw that recently actually, and I meant to do it a few months ago, but they changed the exam completely. So, which you would expect because Azure is constantly evolving. They still had a lot of classic portal stuff in there, the ASM. But when they changed it last November, they basically, I don't know if you've sat any Microsoft exams. I've sat a couple of them. They'll adjust them slowly. Every 6 months or a year, they'll make changes, they'll take feedback and change questions and this and that. This one, they ripped out all of the things that you had to learn and started from scratch, basically. It was all new. So I had to postpone until more recently. Now it's very appropriate for using anything with ARM. So if you're using, want to use JSON templates, or if you're going to be using Portal, and how the portal operates in terms of networking, for example, is very different from the old ASM. It's quite a different model. But yeah, again, a really good point. It's that particular site, the IT Cloud Pro, the Essentials one, has a focus on helping you pass the exams. But as you go towards that, the knowledge that you get is really, really valuable. It's definitely worth looking at that resource. Thanks.
Very good. If you guys don't have more questions.
Can I ask you, how do you determine the topics? Like, is it just
So I think it depends on the people who want to present. Like if there is nobody, I decide what I like. Cool. So yeah, do you want to present?
sure?
Yeah. So you decide the topic.
Can I ask, is there any topics that you'd be interested in hearing about? We can get guest speakers. We can get. Wait, Kanyo is really good.
No. I think other people should present. Yeah.
But is there any interest in specific things like you might be learning or you're working on Azure stuff? Doesn't even. Oh, yeah.
Well, let's make a roundtable. Who wants what? What topic do you want to share about?
Well, I like the sound of my own voice, so I'm biased towards infrastructure, but probably moving on.
What about infrastructure?
What about infrastructure?
Yeah.
What would I like to know about infrastructure? I mean, your point earlier about utilizing ARM templates.
We can do an online.
Yeah, I mean
Good.
that's. I mean, when I'm choosing topics, the last couple of times I've tried to choose things I think would be valuable. May not be your area of focus, but items that I think would be of use to your work. I mean, the way I say I'm an IT consultant. The way that I work with my clients is, I usually help them do stuff, but also help them do it themselves. And I think it's really important to, build your own knowledge. So ARM templates is something I've started on, and I'm going to focus on that more and more. But I think that'd be a very valuable topic, particularly maybe from a starting point of view, because it is a little bit overwhelming at first. Unless you have experience with JSON, then it's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of good info.
Your one topic that you want to.
Maybe container orchestration options, like
Cool.
Swarm or Kubernetes support, things like
Okay.
that. Particularly Swarm, though, I think.
Yeah.
I think we should bring it out here. Or virtually.
Yeah. Or
Tsuyoshi. Yeah, Tsuyoshi. She's very active.
Machine learning, but
me too.
we already had one.
No. This is so deep topic.
Yeah.
Like I think we just scratched the surface. Very basic stuff.
Would like to.
Since you're worried about machine learning, I'll go for securing as well. So I'm taking out, but still securing.
Perfect. Yeah, this is a big topic. Yeah, we see it a lot.
I'm more into the directory side at the moment, so anything kind of related to microservices and structure, maybe container orchestration will be.
Yeah. Maybe we should show it service one.
Yeah. Have you tried Service Fabric?
It's just skim through it.
Okay, cool.
When I tried it.
What will be
How
your
about
topic?
Azure Functions? Have you tried Azure Functions? Okay. Have you used Lambda on AWS?
No, but I knew
Cool. All right, there's some good stuff. We could go on forever. Sorry.
Yeah, well, pretty new to Azure, so I don't really know what to say, but if we can get a comparison between Azure and AWS.
Yeah, like an overview of
Well,
cloud.
and what is better is.
You're talking to somebody on Microsoft.
I know.
Actually,
no,
I
no,
use
no.
a lot of AWS myself. Like, yeah.
More than Azure?
No,
Whoa.
used to be. I still like a lot of the AWS,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, happy to. That sounds good.
Actually, there's I think very good page like a Microsoft release part of the documentation comparison between Azure and AWS, and I think it's constantly updated. So I think this should be the starting point, but definitely we should go deeper on that.
You'll find on the infrastructure side. So if we look at like just quickly, I don't mean to. Just quickly, like on the infrastructure side, you'll pretty much find like one-to-one. Like there are even like some libraries, like Ruby libraries, where you can like change a variable and then bam, like AWS storage will work as Azure storage. So infrastructure, you'll find really, really close race. On the platform as a service side, that's where you'll find the differences. So like we spent a lot of time working on like data pipelines using Azure ML and like cold storage and all that sort of stuff. Real-time analytics on that data. That's I think where we're pushing the field. AWS is just it's a monster in infrastructure. Their path is awesome as well.
I feel AWS as well, but yeah, you're right. Very hard to do. Your customer service, you ask something and then everything by email and then or giving links to something, read this, read that.
Yeah.
They don't really give you right away the answers.
Right.
That's right.
How about your topic? One topic.
HT Insight.
Oh, very good.
I joined the last within of machine learning. More deep version.
Oh, we have more now.
So I put 3 now.
You can just drag and drop.
Yes. Yeah. Deeper, right?
Science tourism authentication, including Azure data free, especially in
Great.
Disaster recovery. Because and should give the ERP system. I should thinking about forward.
Like HA, yeah. High availability disaster.
And that there is it should be performance strategy.
So we could
Any requests?
More like in charge of the platform as a service or functions. That's
and two for functions.
okay. Yeah, function as a service as well.
So I put 2 yes. That's cool. I'm gonna pick, oh man, just one.
No, you can pick a multiple. We can just, maybe just one topic would be good. Or we can do something like Mike, like several short topics or one deeper.
Okay.
It's up to you.
I'm gonna pick functions because I've been getting to functions lately and I want to learn more.
Okay. Let's do that.
And what do you want to?
Functions.
You want to do
Yeah.
functions? Yes.
I think it's very, very interesting.
If anyone hasn't seen it, functions is our serverless PaaS. So you can essentially just drop in your JavaScript. You can connect it to your repo, and you don't have to worry about infrastructure, servers, management, all that sort of stuff. And you get charged only on the operation of that piece of code. So yeah, it's super cool.
And I think that we should bring somebody in the Microsoft team to talk about machine learning.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for sharing. Thank you very much for coming and
Thank
see you next
Great
time.
presentation.
Has everybody signed the sheet to say that you've been here?
Thank you. Mike, can you press this stop sharing thing? Stop broadcast.